You're watching Metal Icons. If you're new here, this channel covers the real history of rock and metal. No clickbait, no fluff, just the stories that actually happened. Hit subscribe before we start because this one is long, detailed, and worth watching until the very last name. We're covering 15 heavy metal legends, the exact circumstances of how they were lost, and the details most channels skip over. Stay until number 10, because that one involves a fake death announcement that came true years later, and it's one of the strangest stories in the entire history of rock. Let's get into it. 1. Cliff Burton. Metallica. Cliff Burton was the bassist for Metallica. He joined the band in 1982 and played on their first 3 albums: Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Master of Puppets. He was not a typical bassist. He played with a wah pedal and executed lead-style solos on a 4-string bass, a technique so unusual that peers called him the Jimi Hendrix of the bass. He wore bell-bottom jeans, rarely spoke to the press, and let the music do the talking. In September 1986, Metallica was on a European tour in support of Master of Puppets. After a show in Stockholm, Sweden, the band boarded their tour bus overnight for the next city. The bunks were limited, and some were more comfortable than others. To settle it, Cliff and guitarist Kirk Hammett drew playing cards. Cliff pulled the Ace of Spades, the highest card. He pointed at Kirk and said he wanted his bunk. Kirk moved to the front of the bus. Cliff took the window bunk. In the early morning hours of September 27th, on a road outside the town of Durarp in Sweden, the bus hit a patch of black ice. The driver lost control. The bus veered off the road and rolled. Cliff was thrown through the window of his bunk during the crash. The bus came to rest on top of him. He was 24 years old. Investigations into the crash were inconclusive. The driver denied falling asleep. No charges were filed. The band has never fully accepted any single explanation. What is documented is this: a card draw determined who slept in that bunk. That is a matter of public record confirmed by multiple band members. Metallica continued. They replaced Cliff with Jason Newsted and released And Justice for All in 1988. But every member of that band has said in interviews over the decades that they never got over losing him. 2. Dimebag Darrell Abbott. Pantera/Damage Plan Dimebag. Darrell was the lead guitarist of Pantera, one of the 4 dominant thrash and groove metal acts of the late 80s and 90s. His signature techniques, the pinch harmonic squeal, aggressive pick attack, and melodic phrasing through distortion, influenced a generation of metal guitarists. His pink-streaked beard and open personality made him one of the most recognized figures in the genre. After Pantera officially dissolved in 2003, following years of internal conflict between Darrell, his brother drummer Vinnie Paul, and vocalist Phil Anselmo, the Abbott brothers formed Damage Plan and released their debut album New Found Power in 2004. On December 8, 2004, the same calendar date that John Lennon was shot in 1980, Damage Plan was performing at the Alrosa Villa, a small club in Columbus, Ohio. The show was sold out. At approximately 10:15 p.m., seconds into the opening song, a 25-year-old man named Nathan Gale rushed the stage and opened fire. Darrell was shot multiple times and killed on stage. 3 other people were also killed: a security guard, a Damage Plan crew member, and a fan who was a former soldier. A Columbus police officer arrived and shot and killed Gale, ending the attack. Dimebag Darrell was 38 years old. He was buried in a Kiss casket, a coffin model sold by Gene Simmons, as a tribute to one of his favorite bands. Eddie Van Halen had Darrell buried with one of his own guitars. That detail alone tells you how he was regarded by his peers. 3. Randy Rhoads. Quiet Riot / Ozzy Osbourne Band. Randy Rhoads grew up in North Hollywood, California, where his mother ran a music school. He taught guitar lessons as a teenager and joined Quiet Riot in the mid-1970s before the band had any significant national profile. When Ozzy Osbourne was dropped from Black Sabbath in 1979 and was auditioning musicians for his solo band, Randy flew out and got the job. He played on Blizzard of Oz, 1980, and Diary of a Madman, 1981, both platinum records. His classical training was evident in every solo. He was studying classical guitar formally and told people around him he planned to quit rock and pursue a music degree. He was 25 years old and openly discussing leaving the Ozzy band at the height of its popularity. On March 19, 1982, the tour bus was parked at a property in Leesburg, Florida for maintenance. The estate had a small private airstrip. The tour bus driver, Andrew Aycock, also held a pilot's license. He took 2 crew members up in a small Beechcraft Bonanza plane for a first pass. On the second flight, Randy Rhoads and the band's hairdresser, Rachel Youngblood, got on board. Aycock began making low passes over the tour bus, where Ozzy and others were sleeping. On the third pass, the left wing of the plane clipped the tour bus roof. The plane went into an uncontrolled spiral, struck a nearby mansion's garage, and exploded. All 3 people on board were killed instantly. Randy Rhoads had been alive for 25 years and 58 days. A National Transportation Safety Board report noted that Aycock had cocaine in his system. No charges were filed because everyone involved was dead. 4. Layne Staley, Alice in Chains. Layne Staley was the lead vocalist of Alice in Chains, one of the defining bands of the early 1990s Seattle scene. His vocal style was built on raw, distorted delivery in the verses and intricate 2-part harmonies with guitarist Jerry Cantrell in the choruses. The band released Facelift in 1990, Dirt in 1992, and the Jar of Flies EP in 1994, all of which charted significantly. By the mid-1990s, Staley's drug dependency had become severe enough that the band could no longer maintain a touring schedule. Their last full concert was in 1996. Staley gave his last known public performance at a 1996 benefit show for victims of the Oklahoma City bombing. After that, he disappeared from public life almost entirely. He remained in his Seattle apartment for years. His weight dropped dramatically. Friends and family made attempts to reach him regularly. He allowed very few people in. His body was discovered on April 19, 2002. Medical examiners determined he had been dead for approximately 2 weeks before anyone found him. He was 34 years old. The cause was a speedball, a combined dose of heroin and cocaine. We're at 4. There are 11 more names on this list, and the stories only get stranger from here. Number 10 involves a man who literally faked his own death as a joke and then died a few years later for real. Don't skip ahead. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the follow-up videos we have coming on each of these artists individually. 5. Lemmy Kilmister, Motorhead, Ian Fraser. Kilmister, Lemmy, founded Motorhead in 1975 after being fired from Hawkwind for drug possession at the Canadian border. He was the vocalist, bassist, and primary songwriter for the band for its entire 40-year run. He lived in the same small apartment in West Hollywood for decades. He played slot machines at the Rainbow Bar and Grill on Sunset Boulevard almost every day. Motorhead released 22 studio albums. Lemmy wrote nearly all of it. He performed live with a medical IV drip backstage in his final touring years, then walked on stage with a cane and delivered full-energy performances regardless. On December 26, 2015, 4 days after his 75th birthday, Lemmy passed away at his apartment in West Hollywood. His manager announced that he had been diagnosed with an extremely aggressive form of cancer just 2 days before his death on December 26th. He died at home in his apartment with his favorite video game machine nearby, surrounded by family. The death certificate listed the causes as prostate cancer. cardiac arrhythmia, and congestive heart failure. He had known for 2 days. He chose not to go through extended treatment. He went home. 6. Ronnie James Dio, Rainbow/Black Sabbath/Dio. Ronnie James Dio's career spans 5 decades. He sang for Elf, then Rainbow, then replaced Ozzy Osbourne in Black Sabbath in 1980, and then formed his own band, Dio, in 1982. His vocal range was documented across multiple octaves. He is credited with popularizing the devil horns hand gesture in metal, which he adopted from his Italian grandmother, who used it as a ward against the evil eye. In late 2009, Dio was diagnosed with stomach cancer. His wife and manager Wendy Dio announced it publicly in November of that year. He released a statement saying, "We will win." He continued working on music throughout his treatment. The metal community organized the Ronnie Rising tribute concerts. Dozens of major artists recorded covers of his work. He passed away on May 16, 2010, surrounded by family. He was 67 years old. 7. Jeff Hanneman. Slayer. Jeff Hanneman co-founded Slayer in 1981 with guitarist Kerry King. He wrote or co-wrote some of the band's most significant songs, including Raining Blood, Angel of Death, and Seasons in the Abyss. He was the quieter of the two guitarists publicly, but was widely considered the dominant creative force behind Slayer's catalog. In January 2011, Hanneman was at a friend's house when he was bitten by a spider, species unconfirmed in official reports. Within days, his arm had become severely infected. He was hospitalized and diagnosed with necrotizing fasciitis, a flesh-eating bacterial infection. An emergency surgery was performed to remove infected tissue. Doctors told him he came close to losing the arm entirely. He spent over a year in rehabilitation, relearning basic motor functions. He made a surprise appearance at a Slayer show in April 2011 to play 2 songs. He was working on returning to the band full-time. On May 2, 2013, Jeff Hanneman died of liver failure at a hospital in Southern California. He was 49 years old. His family attributed the liver failure to alcohol-related cirrhosis, though some reports connected it to complications from the original infection. Both factors were cited in various accounts. 8. The Rev. James Sullivan, Avenged Sevenfold. James Owen Sullivan, known as the Rev., was the drummer and a principal songwriter for Avenged Sevenfold, and he wrote significant portions of their albums and contributed lead and backing vocals. He was 28 years old. On December 28, 2009, he was found dead at his home in Huntington Beach, California. The coroner ruled it an accidental death caused by acute polydrug toxicity, a combination of oxycodone, oxymorphone, diazepam, and alcohol. The band had been in the middle of writing what would become their album, Nightmare. They completed it with drummer Mike Portnoy of Dream Theater sitting in as a tribute to the Revam. The album was dedicated to him and reached #1 on the Billboard 200 in 2010. 9. Paul Gray. Slipknot. Paul Gray was bassist and co-founder of Slipknot, known within the band as Number 2. He was a primary songwriter on all of the band's studio albums. On May 24, 2010, he was found unresponsive in a hotel room in Urbandale, Iowa, and he was 38 years old. The autopsy ruled his death an accidental overdose of morphine and fentanyl. An investigation into how he obtained the drugs led to charges being filed against a physician, who was later convicted of involuntary manslaughter. In the days following his death, Slipknot held a press conference in Des Moines. For the first time in the band's public history, all members appeared without their masks. No prepared statement was read. They spoke about Paul Gray as a person, as a father, as a friend. His wife was pregnant with their daughter at the time of his death. 10. Peter Steele. Type O Negative. Peter Steele stood 6 feet 8 inches, wrote every Type O Negative album, played bass, sang, and produced. The band formed in Brooklyn in 1989. Their sound was slow, gothic, and layered. Nothing else in metal sounded like it. In 2005, the band's website posted a gravestone image with his name and the years 1962 to 2005. Fans panicked. It was a joke, a reference to the band parting ways with their record label. Peter Steele thought it was funny. On April 14, 2010, Peter Steele died of heart failure at his home in Brooklyn, New York. He was 48. Initial reports were met with skepticism from fans who remembered the 2005 stunt. By the time the reality was confirmed, the irony was not lost on anyone who knew his work. He had written about death for 20 years. He had even joked about his own obituary. And then it was real. 11. Chris Cornell, Soundgarden/Audioslave. Chris Cornell was the vocalist and co-founder of Soundgarden, formed in Seattle in 1984. He also fronted Audioslave, released 4 solo albums, and co-wrote the James Bond theme, You Know My Name, for Casino Royale. On May 18, 2017, Soundgarden played a sold-out show at the Fox Theater in Detroit. Setlist records confirm it was a full performance. At the end of the show, Cornell told the audience, "I love you." He was found in his hotel room at the MGM Grand Detroit in the early morning hours of May 18th. He was 52 years old. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as suicide by hanging. His family later disputed the conclusion, citing his prescription medication as a possible contributing factor. The legal and medical debate continued for years after his death. Regardless of the specifics, the world lost one of the most technically gifted rock vocalists of the modern era. 12. Chester Bennington, Linkin Park. Chester Bennington co-fronted Linkin Park, now whose debut album, Hybrid Theory, 2000, became one of the best-selling debut albums in history, with over 27 million copies sold worldwide. He was 41 years old. Chester had been open throughout his career about childhood abuse, addiction, and depression. He channeled those experiences directly into Linkin Park's lyrics. He was a close personal friend of Chris Cornell. On July 20, 2017, what would have been Chris Cornell's 53rd birthday, Chester Bennington was found dead at his home in Palos Verdes Estates, California. The cause was ruled suicide by hanging. He had sung Hallelujah at Cornell's funeral just 2 months earlier. The proximity of the two deaths, same method, 2 months apart, close friends, prompted widespread public conversation about mental health access, specifically for people in high-visibility careers who appear to be functioning while privately struggling. 13. Dead Per Yngve Olin, Mayhem. Per Yngve Olin, known by the stage name Dead, was the vocalist for the Norwegian black metal band Mayhem from 1988 until his death in 1991. He was Swedish, not Norwegian. He introduced the use of corpse paint, white face, black eyes, as a performance aesthetic that became standard across the black metal genre. He reportedly buried his clothes before shows so they would smell of decay. He collected dead animals and kept them in bags, which he would smell before performing to get in the mood. On April 8, 1991, Dead died by suicide at the band's shared house in Krokstad, Norway. He left a short note beginning with the words, "Excuse all the blood." He was 22 years old. When guitarist Øystein Aarseth, Euronymous, returned to the house and found him, he drove to a nearby store, purchased a disposable camera, and photographed the scene before calling emergency services. One of those photographs was later used, without family consent, as the cover of a bootleg live album titled Dawn of the Black Hearts. Euronymous also reportedly collected bone fragments and sent them to musicians he considered worthy. None of this was prosecuted. 14. Euronymous, Øystein Aarseth. Mayhem. Øystein Aarseth founded Mayhem in Oslo in 1984. He ran a record store called Helvete, Norwegian for hell, that became the central meeting point for the Norwegian black metal scene. He founded the label Death Like Silence Productions. He was a central architect of the ideology, aesthetic, and networking structure of early Norwegian black metal. In 1992 and 1993, several churches in Norway were burned, over 50 in total across the following years. Multiple individuals connected to the black metal scene were convicted in connection with these fires, as well as a murder unrelated to Mayhem. The bassist playing for Mayhem at the time was Varg Vikernes, who recorded under the name Burzum. The relationship between Vikernes and Euronymous deteriorated severely throughout 1993, reportedly over financial disputes related to a recording contract and personal animosity. On August 10, 1993, Vikernes drove from Bergen to Oslo with another individual and went to Euronymous' apartment. A confrontation occurred. Euronymous was stabbed 23 times, twice in the head, 5 times in the neck, 16 times in the back. He was 25 years old. Vikernes was arrested, tried, and convicted of murder and arson. He was sentenced to 21 years, the maximum under Norwegian law. He was released in 2009 after serving 15 years. 15. Chuck Schuldiner. Death Chuck Schuldiner founded Death in Altamonte Springs, Florida in 1983. He is broadly recognized as the originator of death metal as a codified genre. Death released 7 studio albums between 1987 and 1998, each one technically more advanced than the last. His final band, Control Denied, was in development when he became ill. In 1999, Schuldiner was diagnosed with pontine glioma, a rare and aggressive brainstem tumor. He had no health insurance. The metal community organized multiple benefit concerts and auctions. Artists from Korn, Slipknot, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers donated items and funds publicly. And he underwent radiation therapy and continued writing music. He passed away on December 13, 2001. He was 34 years old. He never stopped working on music. He never publicly complained. Every account from people who knew him in his final 2 years describes someone focused entirely on the next song, not on the illness. 15 names, 15 real stories. No embellishment needed. The facts are heavy enough on their own. If this video gave you something, whether it's a name you didn't know or a story you hadn't heard in full, the best thing you can do is subscribe and share it. We cover these artists the way they deserve to be covered, with the actual details, the documented facts, and the respect their legacies earned. Drop a comment with which story hit you hardest. We read every single one. More coming. Stay subscribed.